Nice to see you all. Can you hear me at the back? Yes. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Is it okay if I stand here? Okay. Thank you for coming today, guys. My name is Erin. I'm a teacher trainer, and podcaster. And today, I just want to provide you with a little bit of food for thought in terms of how you teach grammar and what you actually teach. And I will be requiring a little bit of audience participation. Okay, so without further ado, let's crack on. Okay, so I'm going to show you a few examples of a specific grammar point, and I would love you just to shout out what it is.
Passive.
Why have I shown you these particular examples? Well, I was making a reel for Instagram, and I Googled sentences with the passive, and these are the first few things that came up. Can you raise your hands or shout yes if you've ever said any of these things in your life?
Only at Christmas, the first one.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So I think we need to ask ourselves a few questions about the information that we are provided with and the information that we pass on to our students. Okay. My next question: are grammar and vocabulary connected? What do we think?
Yes.
Yes. Without question, yeah. However, in pretty much every course book you get grammar, 20 words to do with the body, more grammar, 10 phrasal verbs. Nothing is connected, okay? But if you think about what we just looked at, and think actually, like, use your common sense and your logic and your knowledge of the language. Can you tell me which verbs spring to mind when we actually use the passive in real life? Give me some examples.
Arrest.
Stolen.
Yes. Love. Taken.
Waiting. Got your haircut.
Build.
Okay, lovely.
Got a massage.
These are just four that sprang to my mind, okay? So what you've just done, guys, is you have connected the right verbs to a specific grammar point, okay? And which means that you're thinking more lexically, which is probably, I would argue, what we need to do when we're teaching grammar. We need to narrow our focus a little bit, okay? What do I mean by that? Okay, well, I'm going to give you a few tips. This comes straight from the mouth of Hugh Deller. Does everybody know Hugh Deller? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's plenty of material online if you want to sort of delve deeper into this, but he gives them some really sort of practical, interesting tips. I'm going to show you a tip, and then there's going to be two sentences with the present perfect, and we're going to kind of discuss which one you think is more useful, okay? Okay, so we need to keep grammar in real-world situations. Have a look at the two examples there. And think about what your students need right here, right now. Which sentence do you think is more useful for them? The first one or the second one?
Second.
Okay. The first one to me sounds like something you would find in a grammar gap fill. Yeah?
Yeah.
Teach the probable, not the possible. Again, going back to, yes, any verb combination is possible with have you ever, all right? But how do we actually use it? One or two? What do you think?
Two.
Okay. Okay. Let's just put your hand up or shout yes here, because I've done this before. With have you ever, I think we generally think, oh, this is a brilliant opportunity to practice every irregular verb that's ever existed. Yeah? Have we done that? Yeah, we've done that. But what do your students need, and what is actually possible? What are they going to hear and read and listen to in real life? Make it conversational and use other grammar points around the target language, okay? So for example, oh, I've just remembered I have to call my mum. Give me a second. Or, oh, this is lovely, I've never been here before, have you? So we're looking at the language, the grammar, we're looking at it in combination with other grammar points in natural, real-life conversation, rather than just kind of those isolated sentences, and then, getting your students to just produce these kind of isolated utterances that have no connection to anything, see that? Yeah. And the last one, and we're going to talk about this in more detail now, is focus on institutionalized sentences. What do I mean by that? Any ideas?
Ones that we use very regularly, is it?
Yeah.
What the most common ones?
Yeah. Think about those fixed
expressions.
Yeah, exactly. Those, I would call them a grammatical chunk. So think about I've just, have you ever, I've never, blank before, have you seen my blank? Okay, so the present perfect is actually really, really good for these kind of grammatical chunks because there are millions of them. So let's talk about a few institutionalized present perfect phrases and also think about what your students need right here, right now. Have you seen my? Okay, what would be a good noun to put in there, thinking about your students? Any ideas?
Please, yeah.
That's a big one. Yeah.
Glasses.
Good.
Tell us with glasses,
Okay, and what about this second one? How many times has this been one of the first pieces of information your students have given you, regardless of the level? Or even like if they're a beginner or an elementary student, you say, how long have you been here? Yeah? And even if they don't quite know how to answer, they understand it. Thinking about your students' lives, they're in Dublin, they're having new experiences. What about this one? What do you think they might say? I've never had a Guinness. Yeah?
I've never seen snow before.
There you go. Okay.
Eaten so many potatoes before.
A regular complaint, yes. Good. And what about this one? What kind of contexts and verbs might you hear? It's the most I've ever
Seen. Amazing thing I've ever seen.
seen. Yeah.
Frustrating I've ever experienced.
There you go.
Yes.
Yes number. Exactly.
Most expensive house I've ever rented.
There you go. See? Okay. Can you think of any more present perfect phrases like that? Just those real chunks that we all know and love.
I've always wanted to something.
Yeah. When you start really thinking about it, you'll probably write about 20 things. There are so many. Okay, so just to recap, okay? Always have your students' needs in mind. What do they need right here, right now, instead of just throwing everything at them? What verbs and phrases are commonly used with a particular grammar point? So with the passive, born, made, delayed, those phrases, my train was cancelled, or I've never blanked before, these kinds of things. Those lexical chunks. And perhaps this is a bit controversial, but if there are tons of rules, like think about something like comparative. Like think about how long it actually takes to teach all the rules, and then how much time you actually have for your students to practice. And same with present perfect, I would argue. You can spend the whole week giving them rules and examples, but actually getting them to practice and use it in real life conversation, that's something very, very different. So think about your time constraints, think about your students' cognitive load, okay? And what your students can actually handle, and narrow your focus. And I would personally argue that instead of throwing everything at them, maybe it's time just to focus on a few institutionalized phrases, use them within the context of a conversation or a dialogue, and maybe just focus on those. And that might give your students a fighting chance of actually remembering the language, seeing it in a natural way, and using it in a real life conversation. So if you'd like to connect with me, I'm on all the social medias, and I have a podcast as well. So thank you very much. Any questions? Be gentle.
Time for two questions. Questions only, guys. I'm sorry. Otherwise, we'll have
Go for it.
Okay, in your experience, what is the most difficult or the most tricky grammar point to teach to students?
Present perfect. And all the teachers I've done training with the same thing.
Yeah, thanks.
Just, I've actually forgot my question now. Sorry. So when you are in that kind of general classroom and you've got those students that are grammar, and I want more grammar, and I want more grammar, how do you explain this approach to them when they've been so institutionalized in those gap fills, like you said?
Great question. I think you have to have a pep talk with your students and just make them very aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it. Share that knowledge with your students. There's nothing wrong with that. And I tell my students a lot of the time, and you may disagree with me, but I say grammar rules don't work. How many times have you studied this? You know? And how many times have you met students who have been studying grammar their whole lives but can't have a conversation? Okay? So I tell them this is why we're doing it. Language isn't made up of grammar and it's not made up of individual words. The two things are mixed and we need to learn chunks of language. That makes more sense. That's basically what I do. Yeah.